Well, good evening and welcome to our third Wheat-tastic Wheat Wisdom Wednesday webinar. And we're going to start out with just a little bit of information on the Michigan Wheat Program. These programs are brought to you by Michigan's wheat farmers through the Michigan Wheat Program. And through our wheat checkoff, we have a lot of stuff going on right now. One of those, when we look at, is our referendum. If you remember, in 2011, the checkoff was voted in. And as in with all checkoffs in the state of Michigan, we all have a sunset clause. So every 5 years, the program goes back to you, the growers, and you decide if you would like us to be around for 5 more years. So our vote is February 9th through the 20th. The Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development manages the referendum, and they mailed all of you ballots today. So be watching your mail to get your ballots. Make sure you complete the ballot and follow all the instructions. So you have to not only vote yes or no if you want us to stay around, but you also need to vote production. So for the wheat checkoff to continue, it needs to pass by more than 50% of the popular vote and the production voted. And you can pick any one of the past 3 years to vote, and then make sure you sign it, put it in the envelope, and make sure it is postmarked by February 20th. And not sure if you all know this was something I just found out, but no longer when you drop your mail in the box outside the post office does it get postmarked. It goes to where it's going to end up and be processed, and that's where it's postmarked. So if you are mailing this at the last minute, take it inside and ask them to postmark it so it's postmarked by February 20th. MDA will go through all those ballots, and some of you will be contacted as they will ask you to verify your production as part of their oversight of the referendum. This is our wheat postcard, and all of you should get these twice a year. If you do not get these postcards, you are not on the mailing list. So if this does not look familiar, get a hold of me. Get a hold of me, and I will get you added to the mailing list. And if you're wondering what is it that the wheat checkoff does, this is our annual meeting, February 17th, up in Frankenmuth at the Saginaw Valley Research Center. And then also put on your calendar, June 16th is our field day. Two great events to come to learn more about what we do. If you have questions or need more information, this is my email, all of the phone numbers, even our fax number, and you can just get a hold of me. Or if you see Dennis out in an upcoming meeting, just get a hold of us and we can get you more information and we can make sure you get a ballot. So with that, I know you did not all tune in to hear me. You turned in to learn a little bit more about how wheat makes a positive difference in your rotation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis and I'll let him and Joanna take it away.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Welcome to the webinar. The the topic tonight is winter wheat makes sense, and we're going to talk about in the crop rotation. Joanna Follings is the cereal specialist with the Ontario Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and she's going to be going over some data that they've collected from some long-term trials that really show the benefits of having wheat in your crop rotation. So we know in a year like this, when wheat prices are low, it's hard to figure out how to make money on the farm, and so people question every crop that they're growing. And winter wheat is one of those crops with it when it's in the rotation. All the other crops benefit as well, and the yields increase overall because you got a more diverse cropping system. But Joanna is a colleague of mine. I get to work with her. She's part of the leadership team of the Great Lakes Yield Enhancement Network. So it's my privilege to introduce to you Joanna Follings for the program tonight. So welcome, Joanna.
Great. Thank you, Dennis and Jody. And really happy to be here tonight to be talking to you about long-term crop rotation, something that we're very passionate about here in Ontario and have been very fortunate to have some really great research on. And as Dennis mentioned, given the way that commodity prices are this year, there's lots of questions about growing wheat. And I always like to remind growers that, it's very tough to look outside a single year. But when we're thinking about our cropping systems, we should at the bare minimum be looking at our system in a 3-year cycle, in order to, make the best decisions for our farm, for our soil health, and our long-term profitability. And so I'm excited here tonight to show you some of that research, and what we're finding here in Ontario. Um, so I guess one of the things I kind of thought I would start off with is giving you some insights into some of the crop rotations we do see and where some of the shifts have been just in Ontario in particular, and some of the things that we've learned from that before we dive into the value or benefit of wheat in the rotation. Um, so what used to be a rotation that kind of blew up in this part of the world, and I imagine in parts of the US as well, was related to soybeans. In the 90s, we had the introduction of GMO soybeans, which resulted in, field cropping becoming quite easy. You could plant your soybeans, you could spray them once with Roundup and harvest them, and, it was quite profitable. Um, However, we've seen a big shift, fortunately, away from this system over time, because a continuous soybean rotation is probably the least ideal rotation out there. Um, it continuously growing any single crop, results in the buildup of diseases and insects specific to that crop, and over time can cause yield reductions. So, for example, in corn, rootworm populations over time in a corn-on-corn system have developed Bt resistance in Ontario, especially multiple years of corn in the same field. And then similarly on the soybean side, there's a number of things that, we've seen with this system, issues like soybean cyst nematode. So those populations have expanded and are pretty much across the province now. We see an increase in the incidence and severity of white mold. Whereas if we have a 3 or 4 year crop rotation with non-host crops, we significantly reduce the amount of white mold. We're also seeing a severity or increase in the severity number of races of Phytophthora root rot with all these soybeans. And then, of course, the spread of resistant weeds because of the same or the repeated use of the same herbicide. So not the best system that we could look at from a number of reasons. Um, a better rotation than soybeans on soybeans, while still not perfect, is a corn-soybean rotation. It's definitely better than a soy on soy rotation, but again, over time, it's less effective at breaking disease and insect cycles. There are less roots in the ground throughout the year, which I'm going to show or touch on a bit later on. And then this system is also quite difficult to incorporate cover crops, which we know through, copious amounts of research provide huge benefit to the system for a number of reasons. Another diverse rotation or another common rotation we do see is a corn soy alfalfa rotation. It's great. Actually, it's excellent for soil health. However, this tends to be specific to livestock farms. So if you are a non-livestock farm, this is not necessarily an ideal rotation for you, especially if you don't have a place to go or a market for that alfalfa crop. Um, and I guess, when we get into these more diverse rotations, it's really important to note that the greatest benefits from crop rotation come when there are different families grown in sequence. So if you include a field crop family with legumes, so alfalfa, edible beans, soybeans, along with grasses like corn and cereals, as well as brassicas like canola, we see some more benefit there. And in a system like this, that corn crop following an alfalfa crop can significantly benefit because of the nitrogen fixing capabilities of that alfalfa crop. So again, a more diverse rotation, we can see that we get more suppression of weeds, we break pest cycles, over time we build soil structure as well as organic matter. But an even better rotation, particularly for non-livestock farms, is a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. It's very, very effective at breaking pest cycles. We also see much better weed management because we're able to use a different class of herbicides. So we're rotating our chemistries, and over time, we're getting better weed management. So I know here in Ontario, things like Canada fleabane would be a real challenge in corn and soy, but we actually use wheat as the opportunity to clean a weed like Canada fleabane or chickweed, or some other winter annuals and perennials up. And then, of course, being able to use the different chemistries, we're also reducing our risk of herbicide resistance or the spread of those herbicide-resistant weeds. It also allows for inclusion of cover crops and helps with manure management on livestock farms and also helps spreads the workload. But I guess in a perfect world, or if it was easy for me to say what is the best rotation you could do on your farm, it would be that corn, soy, wheat rotation, but also the addition of red clover. And that's because the inclusion of that red clover provides a really significant nitrogen credit for the following corn crop. In addition to the nitrogen credit, we see improved soil health benefits by including that red clover cover crop as well. So those are kind of some common rotations we've seen. As I mentioned, we're really trying to push towards this 3-year cropping rotation where we have corn, soy, wheat at the bare minimum. But we do see other growers in Ontario actually pushing towards even a fourth crop, where they're trying to incorporate something like winter or spring canola. And again, they just see the value or the benefit out of a diverse rotation, or they're dealing with certain pests or certain weeds that they are trying to manage through rotation. So a question that I get very commonly is, okay, so if Ontario growers are using cereals, where is it that they are actually putting it in their rotation? And so I think this is very similar to Michigan and other parts along the Great Lakes. The most common rotation is after soybeans. So it's a really great rotation. We can no-till our wheat in right after that soybeans. The combine can be going, we can be seeding our wheat right behind it. However, the challenge with this rotation and something we're really pushing growers on is the fact that, there are certain soybeans maturities that maturities are getting longer. We're pushing our soybean season longer, but what happens is that we actually see a delay in winter wheat seeding. And so we're trying to help or encourage growers to look at in those farms that just are intended to grow wheat. So it's not across all fields, but those fields that are intended to go into wheat, to selecting varieties or soybean maturities that are slightly shorter. Even a half a maturity group can result in a planting date of, a week earlier. If we're going to a full maturity group, that's upwards of 2 weeks earlier. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but for every day we delay planting, we lose 1.1 bushels per day. So, you're almost at 6 bushels advantage if you take that half a maturity group to try to get that winter wheat planted ever so slightly early. Another common rotation, particularly in certain parts of the province where we do have canola, is planting wheat after canola. And it's a really, really good rotation, primarily because of the timely planting. It gives growers a wide open window to be able to plant that crop. But this isn't, we don't have hundreds of thousands of acres of winter canola or spring canola in the province, but we do have pockets where it is primarily grown, and we definitely see those growers targeting their wheat in the system after their canola. We also see a lot of livestock producers, if they're struggling to get their wheat in after soybeans or even edible beans, they are also looking at taking out old forage stands and planting their wheat after that. Again, allows for timely planting, but the challenge with this system is getting a good kill on that alfalfa. So it can be really, really good, but if you don't get a good kill of that alfalfa, we have seen instances where that can provide some competitiveness to the wheat, particularly in the spring when things get going again. So it's really important in the alfalfa system to make sure that you are getting a good kill on that alfalfa. Another very common rotation that we see is after edible beans. And again, there are actually growers that are shifting some of their soybean acres to edible beans just to be able to get their wheat planted ever so slightly earlier. We also have some really great research, which I won't have time to get into today, but we looked at different planting dates comparing wheat after edible beans and soybeans, and we found a significant increase in the edible after edible beans compared to soybeans. So this is an excellent rotation, and where growers are able to just get their wheat in ever so slightly earlier compared to when soybeans. Um, and one of the best rotations, I know this isn't a widely grown crop, but that is field peas. It is one of the better options for planting early, just like canola. But then we also get that residual nitrogen from that pea crop. And so the growers that do have this in their system, they see tremendous yields in their winter wheat when they follow field peas. So those are some of the things or some of the ways that growers are fitting cereals into the rotation. But obviously, with that, and I don't expect you to be able to read this, but hopefully we can share the slides after. There are definitely things that need to be considered when determining your ideal rotation. When looking at cereals specifically or in particular, there's a couple things that we have to consider. So, if we're following a corn crop, wheat can be quite successful. We have growers here in Ontario that are planting their wheat after corn silage in particular, especially if they're able to remove that residue and that residue isn't there to help feed that Fusarium granarium. But with corn, obviously there's an increased risk for Fusarium. So it's really important that growers consider using a resistant variety and also plan on that T3 fungicide application. Soybeans, obviously a great rotation, the most common rotation, but the key consideration there is your soybean maturity and when you're actually going to be able to get that soybean crop harvested and that winter wheat crop planted. We also see growers plant their cereals after other cereals like oats or barley, for example. But again, cereals on cereals, as we know, there's definitely an increased risk for seedling diseases or early leaf diseases. And then the other piece of this is if you have a lot of cereals in the rotation, we're not probably rotating our herbicides as much as we would like to see in, say, a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. Forages, again, really great rotation. We get some of that residual nitrogen. But again, one of the things to think about there is that there is an increased risk for wireworm feeding. So that's something that if you've historically have challenges with that, you might see that impact your winter wheat crop as well. Again, edible beans allows for early planting along with canola, but with canola, the one note there is that you might actually see a reduction in your stand or just a slower growth with that following canola. So that, again, just a couple of things to consider when thinking about where you might actually fit cereals in the rotation. But really, what I wanted to focus on today, I guess, just to give you a little bit of background of what some growers here are doing. But what I really wanted to focus on was, what are the impacts of cereals in the cropping system? Why are producers in Ontario growing cereals? Um, we now consistently have over 1 million acres of winter wheat in the province for the last number of years. It was sitting, anywhere from 800 to 1 million, but for the last 5 years or so, we've been consistently over 1 million. And to compare that, we have 3 million acres of soybean and 2 million acres of corn. So about a third of our soybean acres are getting wheat, and we're continuing to push that higher. But we definitely see that growers see the value of wheat in the system, and so that's really what I wanted to talk about with you today. So we're very fortunate here in Ontario. I recognize that not everyone is fortunate enough to have access to this type of research, but we are very fortunate that the University of Guelph, along with OMAFRA, have seen really significant value in continuing to support long-term research trials. So we've got a couple of research trials here in the province where a lot of our data and information comes from. One is at Ridgetown campus and one is at the Elora Research Station. And I'll just pop up a map there for you so you can see kind of where they are relative to where you might be in Michigan. And so the Elora rotation system started in 1980, the rotation component, but there was a tillage trial that had started there in 1976. And then layered on top of that was a corn nitrogen trial that started in about 2008. And so that Elora trial actually just had its 45th harvest, which is pretty cool. And then our Ridgetown trial was started a little bit later in 1995. So it's got about 30 years of rotation and tillage trials. And so really what these trials aim to do is to give growers, firsthand information on the effects of rotation, varying tillage and residue approaches, because everyone has a varying, or their system varies significantly. And so if we could try to provide some insights onto the impact of rotation as well as tillage, at the end of the day, that's going to go very far for growers. The QR code there that I threw on the screen for anyone who's interested into diving into this data a bit more, that QR code will just send you to our Soils at Guelph publications. So that webpage will provide you with all of the published data that's come out of these trials. But these are the trials that I'm referring to as we go through the discussion tonight. So again, at the end of the day, what are the benefits of having wheat in the rotation? Why do growers keep wheat in the rotation? And one of the number one reasons that they keep wheat in the rotation is because we see over time significant improvements in our corn and soybean yields. So this chart here, we'll start with Alora. These results are the first year corn and first year soybean yields. We've kind of grouped them into two groups. The first being 1982 to 2001, and then the second being from 2002 to 2017. And the reason for that is because we see greater benefits over time, which I'll touch on here in a second. Again, this is from different rotations and rotation tillage systems, I guess. And this is an average across all tillage systems. So this includes conventional as well as no-till. And what we found is winter wheat in rotation increased corn and soybean yields. And if we look specifically at our corn yields here, on average from 2002 to 2017, including wheat in the rotation, increased our first year corn yield by over 8 bushels per acre, and soybeans by over 5 bushels per acre, compared to a corn-corn or compared to a corn-corn soybean rotation. And what's interesting, as I mentioned, we kind of focus on we group those into two kind of time frames. And the reason for that is because the yield improvement in soybeans from 1982 to 2001 by having wheat in the rotation rose by 3%. But from 2002 to 2017, that actually jumped up to 12%. And I think this is the challenge sometimes when growers are trying to make decisions is they might not see the benefits right away. And so while the initial yields might be small at first, we definitely see the yield benefits of having wheat in the rotation actually increase over time. So you're getting more bang for your buck as you continue on with this type of system. This is the Ridgetown data here on the screen. And so looking again at corn and soybean yields from this one is the 2012 to 2017 across tillage treatments within different crop rotations in the trial. And if we look specifically at corn yields, corn in a corn soybean wheat rotation yielded 5.8 bushels over corn in rotation with only soybeans. When wheat was actually underseeded with red clover, corn yields were nearly 14 bushels higher compared to where corn was rotated with only soybeans. So again, adding wheat in the rotation there significantly increased our corn yields, and soybeans yielded almost 5 bushels higher with wheat in the rotation compared to a corn soybean rotation. So again, at both locations, slightly different responses, but we're definitely seeing consistently positive responses by having wheat in the system and having a positive impact on our corn and soybean yields. I apologize. I realize there's a lot on this chart here, but what this table is showing is the average soybean yield response under the long-term no-till and conventional tillage systems across rotations at Ridgetown. And what this table does, or yeah, so this is at Ridgetown, and what we found in this when we brought in the tillage component is that a rotation of soybean, winter wheat, and corn, or soybean and winter wheat, whether it's with or without clover, provided the greatest yield benefits. Whereas growing continuous soybeans always consistently had the lowest yields, regardless of the tillage system. And yields actually dropped by an astonishing 11.4 bushels when grown continuously compared to a winter wheat with red clover, soybean, and corn rotation in a conventional tillage system. And interestingly, though, when we look at a no-till system, yields only dropped by 3.7 bushels per acre when comparing continuous soybeans to a winter wheat soybean corn rotation. Uh, Oops, sorry. It should also be noted that winter wheat soybean rotation yielded much higher than a corn soybean rotation in this study. And so this is about a 30-year study. So again, we can just very confidently say that by including wheat in the rotation, regardless of whether you have red clover or not, corn and soybean yields are always higher compared to a corn-corn or a soy-soy or a corn-soy rotation. And so we can confidently say with 30 years plus of data that wheat adds yield to both the corn and soybean enterprise. The other, so that's yield. So one of the, why we see value of wheat in the rotation, number one, we see an improved or increased yields to corn and soybeans. And another part of the system is that by having wheat in the rotation, it provides way more opportunities to incorporate cover crops. In a perfect world, I would love to see every farmer growing red clover with their winter wheat crop, but I also know that there are a number of challenges that go along with growing red clover. In general, or generally speaking, growers in Ontario are applying about 7 to 10 pounds per acre. And many growers are frost seeding it to try to make a go at it. In terms of making selections between double crop or single or double cut or single cut, I think they're both quite effective. Double crop, we tend to have, or double crop, we tend to have, or double cut, sorry, we tend to have more top growth, whereas single cut, we tend to have more root growth. So it just depends on what the goals of your system are. But red clover is kind of the gold standard when it comes to cover crops with winter wheat. But of course, there are challenges, and Ontario growers are trying many things to try to overcome this clover establishment challenge. They've created all sorts of contraptions, but many of them are frost seeding. They'll go out in the middle of the night if they have to make it work. And again, they're doing that frost seeding to try to get the benefit of that frost heaving as the frost is coming out of the ground to hope that we get better seed to soil contact. But again, we also know that establishment can be quite challenging with this cover crop. However, the reason why we push this so much is because of the benefits that red clover brings to the system in a corn, soy, wheat rotation. And this is I guess, why red clover. So this is showing responses to red clover underseeded at Ridgetown. And we definitely see similar responses at the Elora station as well. But on average, we see about an increase in yield of 5 to 8% with the inclusion of red clover. I should also note, and you can see they're kind of in big, bold red lighting or writing, all of these plots received 180 to 240 pounds of nitrogen, so they were more than nitrogen sufficient. So the benefits of the red clover in the system go beyond just that nitrogen credit that we get from the red clover. But again, we recognize that red clover is not always easy in terms of establishment and having a good success with that crop. But there are lots of other options for cover crops in a wheat or corn, soy, wheat system. And so what some of the growers here in Ontario doing, and I guess the most common cover crop that we're seeing to date is now oats, a simple oat cover crop. Primarily because it's very easy. You can, put low seeding rates. It's great for soil building. It can also be used as a forage, and it winter kills. So it's very low maintenance. It's a very easy cover crop for growers to use. For some others, if they're looking for a nitrogen credit, they might throw in peas in the mix to have that, and again, use it for forage or for livestock feed. We also see some growers using things like oats and radish. Again, it winter kills well. And again, it's really great for, especially if you've got compaction and things like that you want to try to break up. We also see growers throwing, they might use the wheat seed that came out of the back of the combine as their cover crop, or other winter cereals like triticale or rye. And again, this is primarily used in systems where there's livestock and they want to have a feed source. And then we have others that are using multi-way mixes, three or more cover crops in the system. Again, it is very farm dependent, depending on what that or what a particular grower's goals are as it relates to that. But it's also very important that before you actually put that cover crop in, you are managing for it. So we really need to make sure that, straw is evenly spread, very similar to with our soybean residue. When we're planting our winter wheat, we want a nice even spread pattern. So very similar with cover crops after wheat. You want to make sure that straw is evenly spread or that you're actually removing it. We want to also make sure we're removing weeds, especially if you've got a very weedy field after you've taken that wheat field off. We don't want that to overpower the cover crops. You also have to be very careful with your herbicide selection. So if you do plan on putting in a cover crop after your wheat, make sure that you're selecting the right herbicides so that you don't have any residual activity that's going to take out your cover crop that you seed. And we also encourage growers to try to plant as soon as possible after wheat harvest to get that soil covered well. And there's also a number of ways that you can incorporate that cover crop, whether you drill, broadcast, or incorporate it. But yeah, so these are some of the things that the growers are using. So if they don't have success with red clover, we do find there's lots of options, but I would say the primary cover crop after wheat, at least in this part of the world, has definitely been oats.
Joanna, you have a question in the chat. How about crimson clover planted after wheat harvest versus spring seeded red clover? Do you have experience with crimson
Yeah,
clover?
that's a great question, actually. So we do have some growers that don't have success with our double cut or single cut, so they will seed crimson clover, and that can be successful, but make sure that you're using crimson clover, as that tends to do much better. The challenge with that, the only challenge, I guess, not with just crimson clover, but all cover crops in general, is just really around moisture. So last year, unfortunately, not a great year for cover crops because it was so dry. So I would just say try to get that crimson clover in as quickly as you can. And obviously, we can't control Mother Nature, but if possible, try to get it seeded into moisture or at a time when you are going to see some rainfall happen. But crimson clover can be quite successful with that. Yeah, so benefits, I guess, of wheat and rotation, improve yields on corn and soybeans, opportunity for cover crops. But another really important factor, and it's actually quite surprising how much growers look at this component, and it's really around the stability in yields, particularly on dry years or challenging years. I'm sure this is kind of the look of some fields in your part of the world this past summer. This was a lot of corn crop across Ontario or beyond southern Ontario, I should say. We saw almost no rain in June, very little in July, and almost nothing in August either. And so, what we have found, both in the long-term trials and on farms, is that we tend to have much more stable yields with our corn and soybeans in a dry year if wheat is in the rotation. So, not necessarily red clover in there, but just having wheat in the rotation. And so, this is some work based off of the trials at Elora and Richtown that a couple grad students looked deeper into the data. And again, so we found much more stable yields in a year, on a dry year, if we had corn, soybean, and wheat. And diversification of corn, soybean rotation with wheat on average increased our yields by 13%. But what was really interesting is that these more complex rotations also decreased corn and soybean yield lags due to reduced tillage. So I don't have that data shown here, but what we found is that diverse rotation, because we hear that all the time, and no-till systems were giving up yield in our corn and soybeans. But what we found, or what this research, not we, what this research found, is that we actually were able to reduce that lag in a reduced tillage system by having a diverse rotation. But here you can see that uh, on average, we were able to increase our soybean yields by 22%. So these are some dry years that I've highlighted here. And on average, what the research found is, yeah, we could actually increase our soybean yields by 22% in a reduced tillage system. When we looked at corn yields at Elora, I've also put the QR codes for the papers there if you want to see all of the data there. But again, we had more stable yields on dry years when we had a corn soy wheat rotation. And the diversification of a corn soybean system with wheat and reduced tillage increased corn yields by 7% on average. And again, reduced the corn yield lags due to a reduced tillage system. And so overall, they found that the corn mean yield benefits from including alfalfa as well, and wheat and red clover with less tillage compared to just short rotations like a corn or a soy or corn soy rotation. So again, this was something that we're consistently seeing in the research, but also on farms. You can almost on a really tough year pick out fields or farms that don't have a three-way crop rotation without wheat. You can pick out those farms and see that they tend to be struggling a bit more. And part of that reason for that is because of the soil health benefits that wheat brings to the rotation. So we found in this research that we not only maintain our soil organic matters levels and our soil health, but we're also actually improving them over time. And so this is a slide I like to share quite a bit because I think it's I don't know, I find it pretty eye-opening when you actually look at it like this. But what we find in a corn soybean system, there's no crop in the ground or no roots or living roots in the ground for 63% of the system. So out of a 3-year system, 63% of the time, you have no roots or living crop in the ground. Once you add wheat into the system, that jumps down from 63 to 47%. So by just adding wheat in the rotation, we only have no living roots or no cover crop or crop there for 47% of the time. And once you add a cover crop, that drops down again to 39% of the time. And so by having more live roots in the ground or throughout the entire system, it helps reduce our soil erosion, but it also improves soil health. This is some work. This is some work from a meta-analysis that was actually conducted across 122 studies. And what this meta-analysis and what the long-term trials have shown is that when you add winter wheat into your rotation and combine it with reduced tillage, it leads to higher levels of nitrogen and organic carbon in the soil, which then in turn benefits all the soil microbes. So they conducted this meta-analysis of 122 studies to determine, what are the rotation effects on total soil carbon and nitrogen concentrations. And they also wanted to examine the effects of crop rotation on the microbial cycling of carbon and nitrogen pools, and how the roles of that nutrient cycling and physical processes, or how that rotation impacts, nutrient cycling and physical processes such as aggregate formation. And so it's really interesting. What they found is that by adding one or more crops in a rotation, so the top bar there on this graph shows 2 crops, the second one is 3 crops, the third one is 4 crops, and the fifth one there is 5+ crops, or the fourth one, sorry, is 5+ crops. The top is total carbon, and the bottom there is total nitrogen with a % change over time. And so what they found was that adding one or more crops into rotation to a monoculture system, so let's say just a soybean on soybean, increased total soil carbon by 3.6% and total nitrogen by 5.3%. If the rotations included a cover crop, So they're not harvested, but they're just there to, improve, enrich our soil, I guess, and improve inorganic nitrogen. The total carbon actually increased by 8.5%, and the total nitrogen increased by 12.8%. Rotations also very significantly increase the soil microbial biomass, carbon and nitrogen pools, and these had an overwhelming effect on microbial activity in the soil. So crop rotations or diverse crop rotations, especially those that include cover crops like red clover after wheat, sustain soil quality and productivity over time. And it really makes them the cornerstone for sustainable cropping systems. And so that's a meta-analysis of 122 22 studies, just focusing in on what we've learned at the Allura long-term trial, is that we see significantly higher soil carbon levels in soils with more complex rotations. So the more crops we have in the system, higher carbon levels we have in the soil, especially those that include a cereal crop like winter wheat. At Allura, we have a couple other cereals in the rotation. So we have barley, oats, and then we also have an alfalfa rotation, or alfalfa as part of that rotation. And again, so this just reiterates what I just chatted about there, from that 122 trial meta-analysis, and diverse rotations improve soil carbon and overall microbial activity. If we look at Ridgetown and we just look at their soil organic matter levels, just in this period from 1995 to 2006, so 1995 was when this trial started, what they found was that interestingly enough, the highest organic matter levels were actually in a wheat soybean rotation, followed by a corn soy wheat rotation, compared to just a continuous soybean rotation. And the corn soy wheat rotation also had the greatest increase in organic matter, particularly in response to nitrogen fertilizer. So again, these are specific to Ontario, but I reiterate what they found in that study of 122 trials. We also had my colleague Dan Surratt or I guess 2 years now, completed a topsoil sampling project where he sampled 504 sites across Ontario, which was really great to get this information. There's a ton of information in that, so I included the QR code there for anyone who's interested. But again, what he found across all of these cropping systems in Ontario, more diverse rotations, particularly those with forage crops like alfalfa, always had higher organic matter levels. And the highest organic matter levels were actually from soils with perennials only. So obviously that's not a system that we can use across the board. But again, by having wheat in the system, it allows us to incorporate these cover crops or incorporate things like red clover, which over time are showing to improve our soil organic matter levels. And then lastly, on this soil health piece, I just wanted to touch on was some of the things that we're seeing at the Ridgetown site. And so what the Ridgetown trial has actually shown is that by having wheat in the rotation, so instead of just a corn soybean or a corn rotation, by adding wheat in the rotation, we were actually able to reduce our maximum economic rate of nitrogen for corn. And so between 2009 and 2013, they actually were able to reduce the amount of nitrogen they needed for their corn crop by anywhere from 16 to 30 pounds per acre. So at the end of the day, what it meant is that it takes less nitrogen to produce the same amount of corn. And so potentially mineralizable nitrogen, which is an indicator of a soil's capacity to convert tied up nitrogen to the plant available form of ammonium, was much higher in wheat containing rotations at this Ridgetown site. And here you can see a photo showing the corn after wheat versus the corn after soybeans. And you can see the effect very early on in the growing season, where we have, wheat in the rotation compared to where we don't. And so the question is, well, how does wheat or how does a more diverse crop rotation actually increase soil organic matter levels. And so really what it boils down to is that diverse rotations, particularly those with wheat, they just increase soil microbial populations and their activity. And they also increase, or we believe that they increase the efficiency of those soil microbes. And so old microbial cells and their byproducts make up a huge percentage of organic matter. So with diverse rotations, we were able to increase the amount of microbial activity and increase the byproducts that they produce over time. And so a balanced mix of residue types, from corn, soybeans, wheat, cover crops, that is how we are able to build long-term stable organic matter. So even if we're not necessarily increasing it over time, but able to maintain it, that's a huge win. And that is what wheat is doing in the system. And so I can sit here and talk about all the great benefits to cereals in the rotation in terms of yield stability on dry years, the value from a soil health perspective. We are also able to disrupt pest cycles. Wheat is a great way to spread the workload, the labor, equipment logistics. And it does have some challenges. There is definitely more involved management compared to maybe just a soybean system. And of course, the short-term economic drivers, particularly on a year like this. And so there's lots of benefits to that. But the number one question that I always get is, well, is it profitable? Is growing wheat profitable? Is this something that I should continue to do? And so based on our long-term trials in Ontario, and I apologize, I'm going to show you the numbers that I'm showing you are actually in Canadian dollars, so please bear with me. But what we found was that yes, wheat definitely increases net returns, but it is not immediate. It does take time. And so at Alora in particular, so that trial has been going on since 1976. The tillage trial is going since 1976. The rotation trial has been going since 1980. And what we found in that trial is that it definitely took time for the benefits of wheat in the rotation to show up. And growing wheat once in 4 years didn't lower our returns. So in the first 20 years, we might not have seen as much of a benefit, but it also didn't have a negative impact on growing or on our net returns. And so this is looking at the University of Guelph conducted a detailed economic study of this system to be able to draw conclusions. And so the cost of production numbers that go into this are from our OMAF or cost of production tables. And the crop prices at the time that this study was done, again, this is Canadian dollars, for corn was $4.93. Soybeans was $12.95 and wheat was $5.63 when this was done. But what was really interesting and what they found is that, so again, prior the first 20 years, we didn't see a negative impact. There was essentially no impact. But after 20 years, we provided an economic advantage of $14 an acre more every year. And once you added that straw into the system, that jumped up to $20 per acre per year. So again, we might not see the big benefits right away, but we don't see a negative impact. And as time goes on, those benefits are realized and they actually continue to grow over time. So that was the Aloris side of things. When we look at the Ridgetown side of things, you can see here that the corn soybean rotation has currently a slight edge over the corn soybean wheat rotation with a $21 per acre net return. However, when we add in the straw revenue, or that straw revenue is considered, the three crop rotation of corn, soybean, wheat had a higher net return than just the corn, soybean rotation. And when we added red clover into the system, that return was enhanced even more. And so we anticipate, just like what we saw at Alora, that the returns at Ridgetown will continue to grow over time. And again, adding wheat into the rotation once every 3 or 4 years adds value to the entire cropping enterprise. Although it could take time for that to occur. So keep that in mind. Um, oops. And so I know I'm showing a lot of Ontario specific data, so I thought I would try to bring in some US data as well. So this is actually work out of Iowa, which shows very similar trends in terms of profitability. With diverse rotations, there is significantly less energy use. So you can see on this, the dark or the black with the circle is a 2 rotation. The I guess, broken line there with the white open dots is a 3 crop rotation, and then the triangles there are a 4-year crop rotation. But what they found was that uh, with diverse rotations, there's significantly less energy use. There's no loss in profitability and significant improvements on yield as well. And so they conducted a field study from 2003 to 2011, so a pretty significant period, and they found very similar results to what we found here in Ontario. And what was really interesting is that they also found the variability in profit was significantly higher for a 2-year rotation. So what that means is that there's definitely more extremes in systems that only had 2 crops compared to a more diverse rotation, which is similar to what we see with our corn and soybean yields, where we tend to have much more yield stability over multi-crops versus just a 2-year crop rotation. So, in terms of putting it all together, I guess the key take homes that I would like you to consider when you're trying to make the decisions around growing wheat is really that diverse crop rotations really improve long-term yields and yield stability. So, as we continue to have these, extreme years where we've got droughts or we've got lots of moisture, we definitely see yield stability when we have a diverse system that includes winter wheat. They can also be a very effective tool for managing weed, disease, and insect pests. I know that here, and I believe there as well, we've got a lot of challenges when it comes to herbicide-resistant weeds, and winter wheat is such a good opportunity to manage those weeds and rotate your chemistries. Cereals also provide opportunities to include cover crops. I talked a lot about the benefit of including perennials, including cover crops, and their value and importance from a soil health perspective. And by incorporating wheat in the rotation, you're able to incorporate those more. We also see with livestock producers, they're able to utilize and better manage their manure in their system. They're also able to spread out the workload. And at the end of the day, cereals add value to the entire farm enterprise. And so, again, I know this is very easy for me to say this, but when we're thinking about our system, we really need to look at a 3-year system as opposed to trying to look at a year over year, because in the long term, there's a lot of value to be had when adding cereals and particularly wheat into the rotation. So hopefully I haven't dumped too much on you or haven't bored you too much. But if you ever have any questions, I threw Dennis, I know that you all know Dennis, but I threw his information up there as well. But please don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions, or if you want any access to any of the papers on some of the stuff I presented, I'm happy to share those with you as well. So thank
Nice
you.
job, Joanna. Thank you. We do have another question in the chat. One way to measure soil microbial activity in the soil is doing a CO2 burst test. Have you done any work with this using wheat in a crop rotation?
That's a good question. So I will have to get back to you to ask if they've been measuring that. So that would be Dave Hooker and Laura, or sorry, not Laura, Adrian Correndo. I'm not entirely sure, so I don't want to say yes or no. But I can confirm that for you. I apologize. Uh, I get to share this information, but all the researchers at the University of Guelph are the ones that deserve the credit for conducting all of this study, all of this work.
Yeah, so we have looked at, or well, this last year we did soil health samples from all of our YEN participants, and actually I'm still working on getting those reports out. I'm missing some pieces of it from the team that did the soil analysis, but we will have CO2 burst data from that, so I'll be curious to see what that says. So I remember you had a SHAP soil health assessment program. Is that what that was, Joanna? I don't know if
Yes.
they
And
did any of that kind of testing
I
or not?
think I think they did a little bit in that. I'd have to go back and check though at
Yeah,
the top of my head what the results of that were. I'm sorry, I don't have that at the top of my head.
yep. But the microbial activity is an important factor, and trying to get a handle on it is something that's hard to do. And so that the CO2 burst may provide the evidence we need to understand how what's going on in our cropping systems and how we can improve that. Um,
Completely agree.
is there any other questions? I'm looking in the chat. Um, is there any other? Yes, I don't see anything.
I see in the Q&A there's like a
Oh,
comment regarding nutrient runoff in Lake Erie. I didn't present any of that, but there is a researcher, Dr. Maren McCrae. She's at the University of Waterloo, and she has been doing a lot of work looking at the piece around runoff in into Lake Erie in particular. I don't and Crop rotation and cover crops and things like that are definitely showing benefits in terms of reducing that runoff that does occur in Lake Erie. I don't have the data here, but if you are interested in seeing some of that, please feel free to reach out and I can connect you with some of Marin's data because yes, it's definitely been very important and it's a part of the messaging for growers in terms of the benefits and the reasons why we as a collective should be looking at more diverse rotations from an environmental standpoint as well.
yeah, I missed that. I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, that's
I
okay.
had another window popped up and covered that up. So,